Welcome to You Said What, the program that tries to answer your questions. Today we're joined by Dr. Bert Alexander, who's the Associate Minister at the Webb Chapel Church of Christ and the chaplain for the Farmers Branch Fire Department, and Steve Steele, who is the founder and director of James Group Ministries, which is a faith-based recovery ministry, and I am Bob Nienstadt. And today we're discussing the question, why do I keep doing the wrong things? And gentlemen, we all know people who seem to just do the wrong things on a natural basis, and we wonder why. And we would like to ask Dr. Bert Alexander for his thoughts on that subject.
Well, it's interesting because the dilemma is human nature. It goes all the way back, I guess, to Adam and Eve. Paul addressed the fact that in his own life that the things that he wanted to do, many times he didn't do those, and the things that he shouldn't do, he did those all of the time. What we run into, I think, many times is folks either A, do not know the difference between good and evil, or B, they have not been trained to seek to do the good. This is part of Satan's ploy, I think. It's part of his modus operandi. If he can get folks confused, he will get them to choose his ways over the ways of God. The problem with not doing the right things is the collateral damage that builds up over a period of time, and people have a cumulative amount of things that have happened, and throughout their lifetime they suffer the pain of bad mistakes, bad choices that have put them into this lifetime of misery, if you will. Steve?
Thank you, Doctor. Let's see, let's start at a really elementary level, if we could. If you have a little baby who has a need, that baby will cry. And when that baby cries, then somebody's going to show up, the mom, maybe the dad, maybe even an older child in the family, and do something about trying to meet that need. And that will happen over and over and over again until a loyalty, do you understand, is developed to usually the mother and the father more than anyone else. And so they become loyal, do you understand, to whatever takes care of their need or does it for them, if you can imagine that. Just because we're adults doesn't mean we're not like that anymore. We still become loyal to whatever does it for us. And if something comes along that does it for you, whatever the does it is, and it does it for even a short period of time, you've already started to build a loyalty to that. Not even that, but a familiarity to go with it, do you understand? And so you add the loyalty and you add the familiarity, and the next thing you have is you have a dependence that is sometimes not good for you, and you know it's not. And you know it doesn't work well anymore. But you keep going back to it because there's simply a sense of familiarity there. At least you know how to do that. You know how to cope with that there. And it is not unfamiliar, but very easy to do and go back to. When we have enough of that, let's say, when going back to that thing that you don't really like anymore, but it's still kinda, maybe it'll do it for you this time, if you just try it a little harder or a little longer or with a little bit of more or better or different ideas, you understand that we are more, better, and different oriented. Humans are always like that. I don't know how many kinds of hamburgers there are, but there are thousands of hamburgers with every kind of thing on them you can imagine. Why do we need all that? Because somebody had a piece of bread and a piece of meat and decided this is boring. Let's put bacon on here. And they put bacon on there, and then something happens and that's boring. And they said, let's put jalapenos on there. So we do our life that way. If we run out of something that we are loyal to when it comes to effectiveness. We just try a little more, or we try one that's better, or we try doing it differently, and it still fails. And so when we finally get sick and tired of that, when it's finally not serving us well, then we are faced with the fear of doing something we are unfamiliar with. And so when a human mind has on one side of it, I really hate this and this is not working for me anymore, and I want to do something different. And on the other half of that mind is the I have never been that place before, doing things differently, and it scares me to death. Where those two places cross, right where they cross, vacillation takes place, double-mindedness. A little bit maybe, no, not that, I'm too afraid. Oh, I'm hating this, oh, I'm too afraid. Oh, I'm hating this, I'm too afraid. And the vacillating back and forth between doing something different and being afraid to do something new traps us in a place that the evil one is smiling about.
Well, gentlemen, do you think that doing bad things is just restricted to what we would consider bad people or evil people, or does someone else, let's say a church member or a church person, could they do a bad thing on a continual basis?
I guess you're going back to Flip Wilson. Flip Wilson back in the late 60s, early 70s, as Geraldine said, that the devil made me do it. And we look for someone to blame. We look for excuses for mistakes that we make. Part of the problem we have in our society, in my opinion today, is we have developed a society of enablers and a society of people that have a victim mentality. I'm this way because my mom did something whenever she was carrying me in the womb, therefore this is the way I am, you need to feel sorry for me. And trust me, there's folks that have life issues they have to deal with. I'm not knocking that. But there are people that have risen above whatever backgrounds they have been in to have productive lives. And they're not dependent upon the sympathy or the help of other people. They have a strong backbone, if you will, to try to make things better in their lives. We have folks, there are folks who make bad decisions, and they make them repeatedly. They'll make them over and over and over. And it is our responsibility, not necessarily to be their judge, not to be their corrector, but to be their encourager and try to let them know that these decisions, these patterns of decisions, are not healthy for you. And they're leading to a chain of decisions that throughout your lifetime is going to make it miserable. You can choose better. You can think about things, and you don't have to get caught up in the decision-making patterns that you've had from the past. You can break away from that. Steve?
I've often spoken to people whose guilt and shame is huge. Christians are some of the guiltiest, shameful people on the planet.
They are.
They just have more to be guilty about because they're Christians. And so the double bind exists sometimes right there. They're maybe even suffering from the illusion that because they're a Christian, nothing is going to be difficult anymore. They're not going to struggle with sin. They shouldn't be struggling with sin. And they'll think, oh my, look at all these people. They seem to be doing so well. What's wrong with me? And we will have people who are dealing with a terminal uniqueness within themselves, as if they had invented a new sin of some sort. And they think, well, no one else is struggling, or nobody else has a hard time like I do. And so consequently, one of the things that they'll do is never ever talk to anyone about it, because the guilt and the shame is too high. The embarrassment and the pride are in the way. So what would happen if we did this? Just for a little while. If we stopped talking about right and wrong, and how about if we just start talking about what works and what doesn't work? Because I know for a fact that if you find what works, you'll keep doing what works, because we kind of like that, you know? It makes us comfortable. And you kept doing what works, and it was serving you well. It just kept repeatedly doing the thing you needed it to do, over and over and over and over again. Would you not have found what's right? Without the guilt and the shame as a stumbling block to even get started.
Well, gentlemen, do you think we could kind of boil this down to the three different areas of why I keep doing the wrong thing? I like to call them the three S's, sin, Satan, and self. And we know that there is sin in the world, and we know that we're prone to sin. Even God, at the beginning of the world, was looked down and he said, I've created man, and every thought and intent of his heart is evil. And God was very grieved over that. And then we had the equation of Satan in there, and Satan just adds to the problems because he is the great tempter and the liar and the murderer, as Jesus said. And then we add self in with our own weaknesses and our own desires and fears, and those things kind of bundled together, I think will definitely cause us to do the wrong thing. What do you think about that, Dr. Brewer?
Well, basically, Genesis chapter 3 encapsulates all three. We see the basis for the story that you're talking about, that with the fall of man, sin entered because of Satan and because of the selfishness of Adam and Eve. Unless we come down really hard on Adam and Eve, they're just representative of the way that we're all hardwired. We have their DNA in our systems, and we would have done the same thing they did. So there's no reason for us to come down real hard on them and blame them for the reason why sin is in the world. But yeah, sin, Satan, and self, I think that's the downfall for man. I don't know what else could be added to that, but I'm sure Steve will.
Thanks. The idea, do you understand, that hindsight is 20/20 makes it sound like it's a good. It isn't always. And what I mean by that is this, is that after we do something that we don't like and we wish we hadn't done, we have a tendency to, after some time goes by, to take a look at that and see the ignorance in it. We see how we could have maybe avoided it or done something different. We even see how we really damaged ourselves and maybe even some other people by doing what we did or saying what we said. And so we're not really pulling the wisdom out of the situation at that point, because we're not free of the guilt and the shame that's caused by the 20/20 part. What we have a tendency to do is take that vision of that event that we have in the now and go back, you understand, to where we committed that sin, if you will, and look at that, and we make a baseball bat out of that knowledge and beat ourselves up with it. When the truth is, if we were to just put you back there at exactly the same time with no more knowledge than you had at the time, you would do exactly the same thing again. So you see, somewhere in there, we have to learn the nature of God's forgiveness so that the wisdom can be free to enter our mind and our hearts and help us not to ever go there and do any of that again, and not throw our hands up and say, oh, forget it, it's never going to be any different. So we really have to learn how to do some of this stuff. And unfortunately, just because you sit in a pew in a church somewhere doesn't guarantee you that you're going to get that kind of skill. Those are life skills. That's application skills. Those are the kinds of things that you need to learn that are certainly scriptural, and they certainly are, without a doubt, the way God would have you think. You can't learn that on your own. There are things that I should not ask Steve about what to do sometimes. I have others that I ask who have a better view of my life and what's going on in it, and I simply am comfortable and very capable now of allowing them to help me decide what to do. If we are stuck in deciding all by ourselves, then we are stuck with faulty thinking more often than not. And we need each other's help. And we don't actively do that much.
Well, Steve, I appreciate you taking us in that direction, because by discussing this question today, we are certainly not here to accuse people of doing the wrong things or doing it the wrong way. We just know that that is prevalent in the world, and we would like to help people be able to find a better way and a right way, if you would. We know that just because you do something wrong or do it the wrong way doesn't mean you're a bad person, because we've discussed even good people do bad things. The Lord even tells us that in His Word. The Apostle Paul wrote to the Roman Christians. He gave them a whole list of the wrong things they were doing, including murder and lying and envy and others. And then he turned right around and said, and you all used to do that, but now you've stopped, fortunately. And so even good people do the wrong things. We know that. What kind of person do you think God is looking for to help through this situation? Because we know that God helps people.
I think that God is looking for someone who is willing to listen. Someone that, not that they're mistake-free. I was just thinking when Steve was talking that someone in my early life told me something that really made an impression on me, and that is experience is the ability to recognize a mistake when you make it again. We make mistakes many times over and over and over before we can come to the realization that we need to change the way that we do things. God, based on the way that He dealt with many of the Old Testament characters, and in my opinion, someone like a King David who made many mistakes, but always had a heart that was pure, that always wanted to do what God wanted in his life, even when he did not, reach that goal. He was always striving to do God's will. I think that's what God is looking at. He's not looking for perfect people. There's none of those, but He's looking for those that are willing to listen and strive to do His will.
I think my closest word to what He might be looking for would be submitted.
Yeah.
James 4:7 is clearly something that comes to mind. But the interesting thing about the dilemma is humans are led to believe that they have to defend themselves in order to survive, and can't rely on anything other than themselves in the process. And at that point, that would rule out everything. That would rule out God. That would rule out friends, parents, anybody, even yourself. You end up trying to defend yourself and building elaborate defense mechanisms. Just trying to head off anything bad happening to you. And you're constantly living in the wreckage of the future like that. You're always waiting for the next bad thing to happen and hope you see it early enough to keep it from having any harm in it for you. And in doing so, you leave the actual moment that you're living in, and you never exist, if you will, in a peaceful place either. And this is a lie that Satan tells, and all he has to do is to start you in that direction. And the next thing you know, you are solely responsible. Your self-reliance is the only thing you have. And self-reliance is fine as far as self-reliance goes. But you will eventually find yourself absolutely powerless and have absolutely no hope of pulling off any protective measure. And then and only then will you realize that that was really a waste of time and that you're going to need God's help with your protective system, and He should be the first order in protecting you. And you should always, always understand and know that He's waiting for that. He's hoping for that. He's just leaving you alone long enough so that you'll turn to Him and submit to Him and let Him do some of this and get better at deciding what's His and what's yours.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your thoughts today, and we sincerely hope that we've helped our viewers and our listeners. And we want to invite you to join us next time when we're going to discuss the question, what are the most common lies of Satan?